Hello. Welcome to the Rebuildables podcast, the show here live on KCOU 88.1 FM. My name is Gerald Hopkins. It is Thursday, September 10th, right now at 12 o'clock noon sharp. You know I'm here. We're going to be talking all basketball, all sports the next hour. I cannot wait. I am so excited. As you can tell in my voice, I cannot wait. This is going to be great. But let's start it off how we usually do. What's going on in the sports world? Because the sports world, as you can tell, it's coming back. In its weird form, the sports world is making its revival. And that starts with NFL football being back. Football is back. The NFL starts tonight with a great matchup. The NFL will kick off its 101st season with the Houston Texans and Kansas City Chiefs. This was a rematch of the AFC divisional round last year, in which the Chiefs beat the Texans 51-31. But if I were to tell you the score of that game, it would not be fair to Chiefs fans and Houston fans, because Houston had a 21-point lead in this game. And I'm going to tell a little personal story here. I'll try to make it quick. I couldn't really watch this game because I had a really bad eye injury. It was a corneal abrasion with an infection in it. So I remember listening to this game and listening to Texas go up 21-0 at the Chiefs' Kingdom, and the Chiefs just deciding to turn on the offensive button, which is something that they're going to be looking to do again this year, and absolutely taking care of the Texans. It's a great start to the season. The Texans team looks a bit different as they lost their primary target, DeAndre Hopkins, in a trade. But it's still exciting to have sports around, especially right now in mid-Missouri, as the Chiefs represent Kansas City, not Kansas City, Kansas. So a title repeat, one that took 50 years to try to do, is something that is absolutely fun and amazing to be around just as a sports fan in general. I am still a Bears fan. I will say it on the podcast. I will say it. You can have me recorded saying it. I believe this. This is not something I'm doing just for the giggles. I'll be forever a Bears fan unless the Bears do something to me that's so negative that I decide to switch fandom, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm pretty chill. On the other news, major college football is back. We've had some college football games. Some smaller conferences in Division I have decided to come back. But this week, the ACC decided to have some games. It's going to be exciting as well. There's still lots of talks about the Big Ten playing. That's just another thing, though, that a lot of this information, I'm going through the college football stuff pretty quickly because a lot of that I go in depth with my co-host Alex Crow on Walking the Field every Saturday, 8 to 10 here on KCOU 88.1 FM. So I don't want to get too deep into college football and what's going on with college football because we do a lot of that there. So I'll save your time and mine and give you another reason to tune back into the station. But the big thing is that the ACC is starting their games this weekend. The Big 12 and the SEC will be starting soon as well. This year, college football is going to be really weird. I'd written an article about how do you even rank college football this year? And I think that's a very valid question. But it's something that's going to be super exciting. But the collegiate model and the amateurism model is something that's going to be very well tested this year. And it's already been tested a bit. The Pac-12 really pushed forward on having guaranteed rights as players during this pandemic, which has caused some of the reason why the Pac-12 is not playing at the moment or does not have any plans. But there's a lot going on within college football. It's something that I could talk about on Saturday, 8 to 10, which I already do. So please check that out as well if you want to hear more college football nuance takes, especially breakdowns of the conferences that are playing and news about what's not going on. The NBA playoffs continue to shine. This is some of my favorite things to watch is the NBA playoffs. Right now, the Bucks tried their best to contain the Heat without Giannis, but the Heat pulled through 103-94 to win the series in 5 games, 4-1. This was an insane series to watch because of the fact that the Heat really did what they had to do to beat Giannis, which is you form the defensive wall of 3 players. And it worked. This has now made massive speculation on Giannis' future in Milwaukee. Again, this is something that I could go into later. Maybe they'll be on a Rebuildables episode sooner or later if something crazy happens around them. Just, keeping that in mind. The Lakers pulled ahead against the Rockets. They play tonight, though. The Lakers are ahead 2-1 with dominant performances by AD, LeBron, and Rondo in the fourth. Also, I want to send up quick prayers to Robert Covington, or Rocco, as a lot of people know him. He had a tough collision with AD. This was one of those just freak accidents where both of them kind of just hit each other in weird spots. But the only footage you really saw of it is that Robert Covington was bleeding from the head. It was not a fun injury. Nothing fun to watch about that. Prayers up to him. I have not heard anything about that. Also, a side note, Daniel House is right now being investigated. He's a Houston Rockets player for bringing one of the people who test for COVID-19 into his room. That's just the rumor that's flying around here at the moment. So supposedly he is out for the game tonight due to personal reasons, and the NBA is investigating. Very interesting, just to keep that in mind. The Celtics-Raptors last night was an insane double overtime game with a bunch of highlights and moments. The Raptors did pull away, though, with a 125-122 win to force Game 7. This has also been a marvelous series because both the Raptors and Celtics bring mismatches on both ends to each other. It's been a battle. Kemba really did not show up in this Game 6, but in Game 5, he had a great game. And it just shows the volatility of both teams, because in Game 5, it looked like the Celtics were going to take Game 6. And then the former champion Raptors are still on their title defense, and they pushed that Game 7 out with Kyle Lowry having a great game. And it's going to be a great 7, a great Game 7. And then they go up, whoever wins that game goes up against the Heat. Wow, my English is like really not on point. So there's so much to look forward to in that series, and that's really exciting. And our final game of the night was the Clippers and Nuggets. The Clips took care of the Nuggets at 96-85. That score is closer than it felt. The whole game, the Clippers really just played stifling defense. Michael Porter Jr., the Mizzou Mizzou player, had a solid game, but then got under fire for some controversial comments saying that they needed to get more people involved in the offense that wasn't Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. I don't really have much to say on this. I think that there's like some validity to this, but also it's as hard as when you don't play great defense to expect to be used on offense. I would hate for Michael Porter to not ever improve on defense and turn into Jabari Parker. So I'm praying that does not happen. And finally, we're going to take a quick little break to start up into part 2. But part 2 holds something that I haven't even told you guys about yet, unless you saw the social media posts that brought you here, which I hope you did. I put some time into those, so I hope those work. But we're going to be having one of the only Washington Wizards. And the Wizards are going to be probably the most interesting team I cover for the rest of this season, because they are really built on two guys, which is something I've always said you need to do. You need to have superstars, you need to have really high talent. But that one talented player has done some things, not in his control necessarily, that have put this team in a really interesting situation. One that I'm very excited to talk to you about. My name is Gerald Hopkins. You are listening to the Rebuildables podcast and show here on KCOU 88.1 FM. When we return, we'll be talking about the Washington Wizards and how a team just about 5 or 6 years ago that was really powerful right now barely made the bubble and won one game in it. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Rebuildables podcast here on KCOU 88.1 FM.
Playing up my heart just like a Casio, breaking it up so you can let it go.
I'm jumping in with my clothes on.
Most party fouls are pretty dumb, but if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Learn more at ultimatepartyfoul.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
You love them enough to do anything for them.
Mom, I need to be wiped.
Coming.
Including checking NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Yerpy.
We're back with the Rebuildables podcast and show here on KCOU 88.1 FM. Let's go. I'm excited. I don't think you can tell, but man, I almost screamed in that mic. That's probably the loudest I've ever probably got on this show intentionally. Sometimes we do have some audio technicalities, and that's my fault, usually. If that song didn't give you an idea of the team we're talking about and the player that really sets the future and the current and the past, at least right now, with the Washington Wizards, it's John Wall. And due to John Wall was one of the things that, and I thought about the Wizards, one of the first things I thought about because I really liked the song for some reason. And I knew all the lyrics. Don't ask me why. But I'd have this connection to John Wall and the fact that John Wall is like a really important piece to this team. But before we talk just about John Wall and what John Wall did or didn't do for the Wizards, let's bring back a little bit of history. Let's bring back some context. So the Wizards, formerly known as the Bullets, have been in the nation's capital since 1974 after they moved from Landover, Maryland. The Wizards break the streak of Rebuildables teams without a title, having won one in 1978 with the core of Bob Damridge, Phil Chenier, Elvin Hayes, rookie Mitch Kupchak, and star center Wes Unseld. Rest in peace, Wes Unseld. Since then, the Wizards have other stars like Walt Bellamy, Gus Johnson, and even Gilbert Arenas in their team's history. So the Wizards have been a team that moved a bit. At one time, I think they were actually in Chicago. They were the Chicago Packers, but don't quote me on that one. But to really understand at least the modern part that the Wizards have played in basketball history, NBA history, we need to look at the 2013-2014 team. And this is a perfect year to jump in. So the last two teams I've really jumped in the last decade. But this time I'm jumping in at 2013-2014 because you can really understand the core of the team that bring the Wizards some immediate success. And it's the core that actually still has most of its pieces around. Well, at least the two pieces that matter for this show. So, what does that core consist of? The first, and probably I'm going to put the most important player of this core, not because of talent-wise, but because of everything else around him, is John Wall. John Wall is the starting point guard for this team and a former Kentucky Wildcat, and has been one of the most notorious point guards in the league. Wall is at this time one of the most athletic point guards and looks to be a leader of the franchise. In 2013-2014, he also is an all-star. I think this is his first time being one, too. And John Wall comes in the intersects between Russell Westbrook and Derrick Rose. People who I'm going to compare to him more later, too. But you have these three-star point guards who are finishing first point guards. They're super fast, very explosive, solid defenders for the most part. I don't want to say these guys were all top-tier defenders, but they were athletic enough to be good on-ball defenders. Their off-ball defense was But John Wall is most notorious for the fact that he, in his prime, and I'm not going to say his prime's gone yet, but right now at least, in this 2013-2014 season, he's a scary dude to guard. And John Wall is a good player. He's a top 5 point guard in the league. You can maybe make the argument that he's not, but still he's very, very good, way above average. He's a up-and-coming star. And that all-star year kind of proves that. But this wouldn't be the Wizards out talking about the other part of the punch, Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal was the perfect guard to complement Wall. As Wall was the crafty finisher, Beal was a better shooter. Beal at this time was only in his second season from after coming from Florida, being a Gator. And him and Wall make this formative 1-2 punch in Washington, one that will transcend the next couple of years, which is so important to realize because it's not just that they have 1 or 2 good years together. It's the fact that they can complement each other pretty well. The Wizards also have some complementary pieces such as Trevor Ariza. Ariza is an important player because he has the ability to do a little bit of everything. As a 6'9" forward, he is a decent shooter. I think he's the 3rd best scorer on this team, if not maybe just beating Bradley Beal this year. But yeah, he is the 2nd leading scorer this year. But he's a perfect example of someone who is good at everything but not great at anything. And I don't mean that as a knock on Trevor Ariza. It's more that Trevor Ariza never specialized in being the scorer or the defender. But he could do a little bit of it all. He had the 5 tools, but those tools weren't the sharpest tools in the box compared to, let's just say, Patrick Beverley. His tool in the box is defense. People look at Patrick Beverley, they think of defense. So he's really good at defense, but not really great at anything else. Trevor Ariza didn't have that one tool that separated him from being very good or great at it, but he was good at doing everything. And he's a very important piece, and I know it's a little bit of a longer explanation, but I think it's important to understand Ariza as that in-between guy, but he's not a star. They also have Marcin Gortat, a.k.a. the Polish Hammer. He's a solid big man. He's not a great shooter, but he's a good paint defender. This team also has rookie Otto Porter. I mentioned Otto Porter because during his rookie year, he doesn't do much. He's picked 3rd overall by the Wizards this year and suffers a hip injury. This limits his year at the start of the season, but he becomes a more formative piece, and he's a solid 3-and-D player. He is a bootleg Klay Thompson. I'll explain that more later. This team is coached by Randy Whitman. This is his 3rd season with the Wizards. Whitman has spent many years as an assistant, but also as a head coach for Cleveland and Minnesota for a couple of years. Whitman also played 10 years in the NBA from 1983 to 1992. A solid, nothing great as a player. As a coach, he is all right. So he's kind of getting his 3rd chance at a head coaching spot, but now he has some talent coming in, which is always interesting to look at. And finally, the GM at this time is Ernie Grunfeld, who had been the GM for the team since 2003. Grunfeld is somebody that I don't think a lot of Wizards fans want to hear me say out loud too much, so I'll try to keep it to a minimal. But in this 2013-2014 season, as I mentioned, the Wizards have had some success. And after a 5-year stint of not making the playoffs, they're the 5th seed with a record of 44-38 in the Eastern Conference. The 4 major players of Wall, Beal, Ariza, Gortat, and a solid bench core of an aging Andre Miller, Garrett Temple, Nene, and Drew Gooden put themselves right behind the Bulls for the 4th seed. And this is a team they play in the first round of the playoffs because they made the playoffs. Like I said, they're the 5th seed. The Wizards then go out and beat a Derrick Rose-less Bulls in 5 games. This series is not as entertaining as it could have been, but it's a playoff series win, and that's a playoff series win. You have to just respect the fact that they won it, even if it wasn't the way everyone wanted it to be. But that's really important for the fact that I really wish I could have seen Derrick Rose and John Wall in the playoffs. That would have been so much fun, but I can only wish, This leads the Wizards to the 2nd round matchup with the Pacers, which ends with the Pacers beating the Wizards in 6 games. And this is a Pacers team that's, I don't want to say just up and coming, but it's just a solid overall team. With this team in this prime has Paul George, Danny Granger, and Roy Hibbert. And the legend himself, Lance Stevenson. And I know I mentioned Roy Hibbert like he is some crazy godly center. He's not, but for the time being, he was pretty solid with the Pacers and good enough for me to mention him. The thing about this Pacers team, was they were so good defensively. Paul George, Danny Granger, Lance Stevenson, and Roy Hibbert may not have been the offensive force that a lot of people wanted them to be, but the defensively, wow. This Pacers team holds the Wizards to 63 points, a reminder of that powerful defense in a playoff game. The Pacers team then goes to lose to Miami in the Eastern Conference Finals, but we get an all-time classic moment of Lance Stevenson blowing in the ear of LeBron. I have no other words for that. Overall, this is a good foundation season for the Wizards. We get to see a little bit of the power of Bradley Beal and John Wall, and it gives them a chance to really put the league on notice. Finally, the Wizards are back. I don't want to say finally, but before that, the Gilbert Arenas-led Wizards were solid, but ran into a lot of controversy via Gilbert Arenas. This leads us now to 2014-2015, which sees some shakeup of the core of the Wizards. On the draft front, the Wizards only had a 2nd-round pick, and they took Jordan Clarkson, M-I-Z, from Mizzou. He's then traded to the Lakers the next day for cash considerations. Now, we look back at this, and Jordan Clarkson's a solid NBA performer, but we can't criticize this trade too much because in hindsight, between Andre Miller, Beal, and Wall, the Wizards didn't really need another guard. And he was a 2nd-round pick. So if you're going to miss or you're going to trade away somebody, you're going to trade away your 2nd-round pick. And they didn't even have a 1st-round pick. So it's not a horrible trade, but now we look back at it and you go, Mo, if you have Jordan Clarkson as a backup, maybe this changes things. But it's kind of hard to think that Ernie Grunfeld or anybody really knew that Jordan Clarkson was going to be as solid as he is now. On the free agent front, the one major signing is Marcin Gortat to a 5-year, $60 million deal. Like I said earlier, Gortat was a solid player, not a great shooter, but it doesn't matter just yet. They also signed a 37-year-old Paul Pierce to 2 years, $11 million on July 17th. This is not a bad signing because you don't really miss. It's Paul Pierce at 37, and he hits a great playoff shot for this team, but you kind of just let him do what he wants to do. This is his final trot, and he's a solid player. This signing, though, happens right before a big trade. The Wizards traded Trevor Ariza to the Rockets in a 3-team trade with the Pelicans. The Wizards got in return $8.5 million in salary cap. And this is actually pretty important because Ariza wasn't going to stay with the team, so they at least got salary cap space for him. I know keeping Ariza probably would have been a better move, but they were already near the luxury tax and also had to prioritize John Wall and Bradley Beal. So at least getting some cap space for him works out. Another small trade in the middle of the season. The Wizards trade Andre Miller to the Kings for Ramon Sessions. This is a deadline date trade that moved a 38-year-old Andre Miller for a younger Sessions who had an extra year on his deal. So you moved an expiring contract to the Kings so the Kings can move on from Andre Miller, and you got a younger guard. It was a pretty solid move, in my opinion. But for the most part, the Wizards don't make many moves outside of some guys going up and down in the G League, but that doesn't really matter for us because their core is pretty solid still. They finished the season 46-36, retaining the 5th seed like last year, and this team had 5 guys in double digits. John Wall averaged 17.6 points. He gets his second-year All-Star. Bradley Beal has 15.3 points. Marcin Gortat has 12.2. Paul Pierce at 11.9, and Nene at 11. This balanced attack makes this team all more fun to watch. And a new bench of Chris Humphries, who we don't really want to talk about. Ramon Sessions and Otto Porter work to provide some depth. It's not a lot, but we're getting there. The Wizards repeat last year, and they win the first series in a 4-0 sweep against the 4th seeded Raptors. These are the notorious DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry-led teams for the Raptors that were really good in the regular season, but they just couldn't click together in the postseason. And it just proved when a young and up-and-coming Wizards team took them out in 4 games. But almost like deja vu, the Wizards lose their second-round matchup in 6 games. But this is to the Hawks. And this Hawks team, one of the more interesting teams of the 2010s for the sole fact that they had no real superstar unless you consider Al Horford their superstar. The team of Al Horford, Paul Millsap, Jeff Teague just had a really balanced attack that just kind of worked. And they had a lot of depth, including Kyle Korver, Damari Carroll, another Mizzou player, Elton Brand, Kent Bazemore, and Thabo Sefolosha. The team was not great, but it was deep. And just all those guys could fill a lot of spots, did a little bit of everything. And this is a pivotal moment, and I'm going to say pivotal about 4 or 5 times this episode because the way the Wizards have to change their attack like that is frustrating. But I say this is a pivotal moment because the Wizards risk just being a mediocre in the middle team. And one thing, I think I've mentioned this about 1,000,000 times, it's the most important for these teams is to not be in the middle. And they were fearing that. This catapults us into the 2015-2016 season, a year that changes course for the Wizards' future. On the draft front, the Wizards had the 19th and 49th pick. And with the 19th pick, they take Jerian Grant. And with the 49th pick, they take Aaron White. And on draft night, Grant is gone. He's traded twice. First, the Wizards trade him to the Hawks. Then the Hawks trade him to the Knicks. All on the same night. He wore 3 different draft caps. That's insane. Poor Grant. The Wizards, though, receive from Kelly Oubre Jr. from the Hawks. This is a win for the Wizards in hindsight because Oubre has been a better player overall than Grant. Plus, the Wizards, again, really didn't need a backup guard, or so they thought. Over the offseason, Oubre signs with the Wizards for 2 years and $30 million, and the Wizards trade a 2020 round draft pick for Jared Dudley, some more depth. They also re-signed Drew Gooden for 1 year and $3.3 million. And on February 18th, the Wizards trade Duane Blair and Chris Humphries for their first-round pick to the Suns for Markieff Morris. Oh, wait, did we talk about that last week? Yeah, we did. So this is really the episodes combining each other. I did not plan for this, by the way. I alluded to the Suns having some issues with Morris in the last episode, so getting Morris for Blair and Humphries was a solid deal. And the pieces were there for the Wizards, but the injuries weren't. During the season, Bradley Beal had multiple injuries, such as in November he had a shoulder injury that sidelined him for 3 games, a lower right leg injury that sidelined him for most of December and some of January, and a sprained pelvis that made him miss 3 more games in March. Beal only played 55 games this season. John Wall, though, in return, has an amazing season. He averages a double-double with 10 assists and 20 points. This is his 3rd year being an All-Star. Otto Porter plays most of the season and averages finally double figures at 11.6 points. Grant and Morris make their impact, but it's not enough. Or Gortat and Morris. My mistake. Wall also misses the last 5 games of the season with knee soreness, but then gets shut down as the team is out of playoff contention. This leads to John Wall later this offseason getting surgery on both knees. According to Tyler Burnham at the NBC Sports Washington, his left knee was to get rid of like callus deposits, and to ease the pain in his right knee was to remove loose bodies. Doesn't sound right, but that's what ended up happening to John Wall at the end of the season and into the offseason. The season ends with the team out of playoff contention at 41-41. This leads to the firing of Randy Whitman as the coach. If last season was kind of a wake-up call to not be in the middle, this year was the nightmare that probably really woke them up. With Wall getting 2 major knee surgeries, that meant the future of the 1-2 punch with Wall and Beal would be a test. This now launches us into the 2016-2017 season with a new coach and some new fears. The Wizards hired Scott Brooks as their new coach. Brooks was the former head coach of the three-headed monster, which was Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, all MVPs. And he was a perfect hire for this team. I think a lot of people really don't think of Scott Brooks as as great of a coach because he couldn't have the three-headed monster that he wanted to. But I really think he's still a very solid coach. And for the Wizards, I think he's a perfect person for him. The Wizards, for the first time in their 55-year history, did not have a draft pick. So they didn't pick anybody. Over the break, the Wizards beef up their bench again. I know. I've said this like 6 times. They signed Daniel House, who's now being investigated, Thomas Satoransky, and most importantly, they signed Bradley Beal to a 5-year, $127 million contract. So they finally lock up Beal after his rookie contract's over. And that's really solid. And they started the season somewhat slow under the new coach, but they pick it up. And on February 27th, the Wizards trade Andrew Nicholson and Marcus Thornton and a 2017 first-round pick for Bojan Bogdanovic and Chris McCulloughan. This is a classic trade-away assets pick by the Nets at the time. And because the Nets are struggling because they'd taken the KG, Paul Pierce, and not even Ray Allen duo from the Celtics that were at like 35 at this time. So now they're in rebuild mode. So the Wizards, who are not in rebuild mode, say, hey, we'll take your good scorer. He's an expiring contract. We'll give you a player. We think we can keep your that contract that you're giving us. We want to contend. You want to rebuild. So this is, I think, a solid trade for the Wizards because I really like Bojan Bogdanovic. I think he's really underrated. I think the Jazz would have won their playoff series if he was there, but that's beyond me. But he adds some scorers to Beal and Wall, and not just so that 1-2 punch doesn't get really tight, but also just giving themselves more chances to have someone who could shoot. Because both these guys are really good at finishing. I know I said John Wall is a better finisher, and I stand by that. But Bradley Beal is not a bad finisher either. So now having more pieces that could score around them just makes them better. And this team ends the season really well, with John Wall again averaging a double-double and being a fourth-year All-Star. And Beal and Wall both averaging 23.1 points. Otto Porter averages 13.4. Markieff Morris averages 14th. Gortat averages 11. And Bojan Bogdanovic averages 12.7. This is the most balanced attack this team has seen. And we had a balanced attack last year. It's just even better. They end the season at 49-33. This is the best record that the Wall and Beal combo have had to this point. They get the 4th seed instead of the 5th seed. Big difference. And they beat the 5th seeded Hawks team in somewhat of revenge of 6 games. I'm not going to go too in-depth to this series. Most importantly, you need to know is that Wall and Beal played pretty well, and the team did what they had to do. Simple as that. But this then leads us to one of the most infamous series in Washington, and I think the 2010s in general. And this is the second-round series against the Isaiah Thomas-led Celtics. I'm going to go in depth into this series because it had everything. Isaiah Thomas, who was the last pick in his draft class, and it was an undersized guard, had found a home in Boston. This season is highlighted when Isaiah Thomas has to play an in-tribute game to his sister after his sister was killed in a car accident. He plays the day after against the Bulls and scores 52 points to win the games. It is one of the more emotional moments in recent NBA history, and something that will live forever, at least in the memory of Boston fans, but in NBA fans in general. Isaiah Thomas is having the season that changes the Boston's trajectory completely. And this second-round series between just the Wizards and the Celtics had a lot already. The teams have met multiple times in the regular season. And before one of those games, the Wizards decided to wear all black as a funeral game. This was before the Isaiah Thomas sister was killed, so this is not a punch on that. But it was just more of a petty move, which the Wizards ended up winning that game. It was in the regular season. This funeral game is remembered by Boston, and when they had a chance to win the series in Game 6, they in return wore all black, like the funeral. And they lose the game to a John Wall 3. John Wall hits a go-ahead 3 with like 5 to 6 seconds left. They win game 6. So this goes to a game 7, a lot of tension, a lot of heat. And what really adds to the legend of Isaiah Thomas is the Celtics winning game 7. Isaiah Thomas has 29 points and 12 assists. And Isaiah Thomas now kind of bounces around teams and even the Wizards at one point. But this moment is huge. And it really solidifies his legend for this year in Boston. And this game 7 loss is something that really felt like bad timing. And while the Wizards may have been better team at that time, they also ran into a hot team that had kind of like this moment in history feel to it. This win also solidified that the Wizards had talent, but they needed to capitalize on it. This blasts us into the 2017-2018 season, the year that John Wall gets his deal. On the draft front, the Wizards trade away their second-round pick, Tim Frazier, a theme of the Wizards trading away on draft day. Over the offseason, John Wall gets paid. He gets 4 years, $171 million. This is the Supermax contract. And I'll get more into that contract later. The Wizards also signed Otto Porter Jr. to a 4 years, $106 million deal. Porter was coming up really well, and the salary cap bumped up because of the league's revenue. So he makes a lot of money for just playing well at the right time. But the sacrifice for this was Bogdanović. This was a significant move for the Wizards because that means they really trusted Wall, Beal, and Porter, but also meant with that trust they had to get rid of Bogdanović because he was worth too much. That trust is really put to the test this year. John Wall has a great first half of the season, but ends up missing 10 games with right shoulder soreness and left knee discomfort. He is selected to the All-Star team for the 5th year in a row. Yet on January 30th, John Wall decides to have knee surgery to clear up pain in his left knee. This takes him out to the end of March. Beal in return steps up his game and makes his first All-Star appearance because of it. The rise of Bradley Beal is one of the reasons why the team is in the spot that we're going to get to later, but the spot it is in today. Otto Porter has a solid season, almost averaging 15 points. Kelly Oubre finally makes his mark and averages 11.8 points. Markieff Morris stays steady and averages 11.5. The team changes when the primary scorer is Beal, not Wall. And this leads to some of the early playoff struggles this team has. This team ends the season 43-39, and they grab the 8th seed. The Raptors decide to remind them of 2014 and 2015. The Wizards lose to an improved Raptors team that has a lot of the core pieces that we see right now in the Game 7 that they're going to go into. Then they lose this team in 6 games. There is some panic that sets in, but also hope. People really wanted to see with the emergence of Bradley Beal how John Wall and Beal could work together, but that was if health was in their favor. The promise of the future guides us into the 2018-2019 season. On the draft front, the Wizards had the 15th and 44th pick. With the 15th pick, they take Troy Brown Jr. They don't trade him. I think that's something. The 44th pick, they take Yusuf Sanon. Some offseason moves. On June 26th, the Wizards trade Marcin Gortat to the Clippers for Austin Rivers. Something I haven't alluded to much is while Gortat was a very solid player, he'd had some issues within the organization and how they ran the organization. He had some pretty solid beliefs on Wall and Beal, and especially Wall. So there's some internal struggles here. And Gortat never really wanted to develop a 3. And this only becomes so much important because this is when the Wizards, the Warriors are really having their moment of dominating the NBA with how well they shoot the ball. So this now change this gradual change into teams really focusing on the 3 puts Gortat in a really weird spot because if he tries to learn to get a 3, that takes time, and he's not young. He's in his 30s. But in return also could add a lot of value to his game. Gortat is hesitant on learning a 3. He feels it's not necessary, and he feels that there's a spot still for him in the league. In return, Austin Rivers gives that bench depth that now has become more and more necessary at guard because of the injuries, especially to Wall, but also those early injuries we talked about with Bradley Beal. While Rivers is not a star by any means, he adds that solid bench guard. Losing Gortat means the Wizards were on a market for the center. They claimed Thomas Bryant off of waivers from the Lakers, and they also signed Dwight Howard. I'm not going to speak on that. But this season really challenges the Wizards' future, all because of John Wall. Wall starts the season really well. By December 29th, he is ruled out with a left heel injury, which leads to John Wall having surgery on this heel. That takes him out for the rest of the season. This has been the last game. December 29th was the last time John Wall was in a Wizards uniform. Wow. In return, Bradley Beal keeps up his all-star level performance, and he gets that second all-star award. But there's some moves that are going to be made, and I'll tell you why. On December 7th, the Wizards trade away Jason Smith to Milwaukee in a 3-team trade between Milwaukee, Cleveland, and the Wizards. The Wizards received Sam Decker for Cleveland. This is a small deal. On December 17th, the Wizards trade Kelly Oubre Jr. and Austin Rivers for Trevor Ariza. This was a risky trade before the Wall injury, as the team wasn't really playing well. So Ernie Grunfeld felt that it was necessary to get some veteran chemistry to the team, and he tries to mix things up. So instead of risking it on Kelly Oubre and Austin Rivers, he feels that Trevor Ariza is going to be a more solid fit at the moment. On February 5th, John Wall's heel that he had surgery on and developed an infection. And then John Wall also ruptures his left Achilles tendon, which sets his timetable back to 2020-2021, not the 2019-2020 season. This has made that Supermax deal that I said I'd talk to you about later so hard to talk about, because it's put the Wizards in a hole that they have to really, there's no real right answer on it. This turns the Wizards into sellers. The Wizards trade away Otto Porter to the Bulls for Jabari Parker and Bobby Portis and a 2023 pick. This is a tough trade for the Wizards because they didn't really get the value of what Otto Porter was at that moment. But this trade doesn't look as bad as now due to Otto Porter's injury concerns that we've now seen. February 7th, the Wizards trade away Markieff Morris and the 2023 second-round pick to New Orleans for Wesley Johnson. This was to get the Wizards out of the luxury tax, and it gives Morris a chance to move to a team that's in a better spot. This isn't the greatest trade, though, but the Wizards became sellers, and they lost a lot of value in their players. At the end of the season, the team finishes 32-50. This leads to Ernie Grunfeld, after 16 years of work within the organization, being fired on April 2nd. They appoint Tommy Shepard as the interim GM for the rest of the year. The season was defined by one man who defined the franchise, John Wall, and his extended injury is a cloud over the franchise and makes the future only more uncertain. That brings us to this year, 2019-2020. On the draft front, the Wizards had the 9th pick. They took Rui Hachimura. The former Gonzaga Bulldog is a promising player with a well-rounded skill set and is a solid pick. They also traded cash to Philly for Admiral Schofield and Jonathan Simmons. Might as well. 2 young guys. See if they pan out. On July 6th, the Wizards were a part of 3 trades that day. The first one is they traded Dwight Howard to Memphis for CJ Miles. Dwight wasn't any good. The second trade, the Wizards traded away Aaron Wright to Brooklyn in a 3-team deal with San Antonio, and they received David Bertans, the steal of all these picks. Bertans is one crazy player, and he proves it this year. In the third trade, the Wizards traded away cash to New Orleans in a 3-team deal, including the Lakers. This was the Anthony Davis trade. The Wizards received Isaac Bonga, Jeremiah Jones, Maurice Wagner, and a 2022 second-round pick from the Lakers. The Wizards were the team that got the leftovers to make room for AD, and it is what it is. Then on July 7th, the Wizards traded away Thomas Satoransky, the day after the 3 trades, to the Bulls for either a 2020 second-round pick from the Bulls or the Grizzlies, whichever one turns out better. This was a move because Satoransky was going to leave, and they didn't want to pay the contract that the Bulls had offered, so they got rid of him. The Wizards also signed Isaiah Thomas, there's no irony here, and Ish Smith. The team struggles, but there's 2 bright spots. Bradley Beal shines, and this is his first season without Wall at all. So he signs a contract deal for 2 years, $72 million, that has a player option for 2022 and 2023. This is the max he could sign for. Second, Bertans shows up from 3, shoots 43%. A midseason move is that the Wizards trade Yusuf Sanon and Isaiah Thomas to the Clippers, and they got Jerome Robinson in return. Robinson's a younger guard than Isaiah Thomas, and they didn't have to give up any draft picks for him. The Wizards pre-pandemic were 24-40, but they somehow, due to how the bubble works, snuck in. But between Bradley Beal and David Bertans deciding not to play in the bubble, they end their season 25-47. It really wasn't. They shouldn't really been there. Their 2 best players decided not to play, and their mathematical chances were so low. It was kind of, they had what the Suns had without all the players. The Wizards' future is so uncertain because of all this. With the waiting of John Wall to come back next season now, and how good or bad he can be is totally determined on him. And it's hard to trust a guy who's been out for 2 years. and the league that has changed around him. When we return, I'll go quickly into part 3. Where do we go here from if you're the Wizards? They have the 9th pick, and I'll tell you what I think they should do with it, and other moves that are available. Thank you for tuning into the Rebuildables podcast and show here on KCOU 88.1 FM. My name is Gerald Hopkins, and we'll be right back with more Rebuildables here on KCOU 88.1 FM.
Get in the A's and don't slip, and get with a case just for selling it. I know them gorillas, I hang with them killers. They paint them as villains when really they living. We got a bar, this is World War III. I'm the new Jay-Z, I ain't write it down. I'ma steal that crown, I'ma do that thing.
Tune into High and Tight with me and my co-host Logan Perone as we catch you up on the latest signings, trades, news, scores, and highlights from around America's pastime. Every Sunday at 11 a.m. on the 88.1 FM stream and on our website kcu.fm on the Blue Box.
A delicious power breakfast. Great way to start the day.
I'm Brandon Anthony.
And I'm Keegan Harbin.
Make sure to tune in every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. to listen to me.
And me on our new show, Breakfast of Champions.
Here on KCOU Sports, KCOU 88.1 FM.
Hey, this is Brian.
And Mikey.
And Pat from Weezer.
And you're listening to
KCOU 88.1 FM Columbia.
What's up? This is Tajay of the Mighty Souls of Mischief crew. I'm chilling with my man Festo, my man A Plus, and my man Bo. You know he's dope.
Yo.
And right now, we're just maxing in the studio. We're hailing from East Oakland, California, and sometimes it gets a little hectic out there. But right now, we gonna up you on how we just chill.
Dial 7 digits, call up Bridget, her man's a midget. Plus she got fringe, yo, I can dig it. Here's a 40 swigget, you know it's frigid. I got him chilling in the cooler, break out the ruler. Damn, that's the fattest dog I ever seen. The weather's keen in Cali, it makes it feel like Maui. Now we feel the good vibrations. So many females, so much inspiration. I get inspired by the blunts too. Up front, you. If you hang with the bunk crew, I roam the strip for bones to pick. What I find when I'm gone, take her home and quickly do this. I need not explain this. A Plus is famous, so get the.
Hey, miss, who's there? I'm through there, no time to do hair. The flicks it ain't, so get straight.
Hello. Welcome back to the Rebuildables podcast here on KCOU 88.1 FM. We're end of the day solid here with where do we go now with the Washington Wizards? And what the Wizards need to do, I don't really actually have an answer for. It's a first, I know. But I'm going to give you some ideas that are doable. First of all, the Wizards have the 9th pick this year. And the thing is, the Wizards are kind of in this weird spot where they can take anybody in the draft. And because this draft is very role player centered, you don't have a lot of superstars necessarily, or guys that are not like guaranteed number 1, 2, 3s. They could go for anybody, either a bench step player or a starter. Guys like Obi Toppin, Tyrese Haliburton, Daniel Vassell and they can be fine with any of them. They need to go for the best player available, because if they don't like the best player that's there, they can trade him away and get some bench depth or even a starter if one team really likes him. So there's a lot that they could do here. They could either take the best player and trade him, or take the best player and work with him. They can put him on the bench or start, and this player does not really matter. That's why I didn't give him a select pick. You can always say they want guard depth, sure, but if you get a big man like Obi Toppin, you can trade for a guard. There's a lot of movement here. The draft pick is not the biggest thing they need to do, though. They need to re-sign David Bertans. Bertans is one of the pinnacles of modern offense. He's a 4, he's pretty tall, and he can shoot the hell out of the ball. And it's so important because he's so good at shooting, they need to keep him as long as they can. He is a solid player. He could fit well around John Wall and Bradley Beal. He fit well with Bradley Beal already, and John Wall, in his game playing style of attacking the rim, would fit him perfectly. And I feel they have to ride out with John Wall. A lot of people say you got to trade him or trade Bradley Beal, move on. And it's not even because I love John Wall and I see him as like the guy who competed with Derrick Rose and Russell Westbrook and really changed the way we looked at point guards for a couple years, and it was such an exciting time. It's because what John Wall represents for Washington is bigger than his contract. It's bigger than just his play. That's what they were riding on. And right now his value is so low that for what John Wall is, they're not going to get anything near it. So don't risk getting rid of the guy you've built so much around for pennies on the dollar. If he flunks out, you can move on. But if he's 3/4 of the player he once was, there's a lot that can go right. And plus, Bradley Beal has proven his stardom. They have chemistry as teammates. And I know John Wall will not be the same player. And if he is, I'll be shocked. But they've invested too much to let it burn without giving themselves a chance. The Wizards got struck by the infinite unluck, which is injuries. Something that no rebuildables team that's at the top, bottom, in between can control. Any team can pick the right guys and still lose, just because that right guy has one too many ACL tears or ankle never figures itself out. But to get rid of all of that and try to build right now would be really tough. It'd be tough to swallow. John Wall may not get the value that he's worth if you trade him right now. And even if that contract expires and they don't re-sign him, you win out fighting. And there's something important about that. To give up on this team would mean to give up on all the work that those two put together and the team they built around them. And it's important to remember that John Wall was still a very, very good point guard. Overall, the Wizards are the most interesting team for that reason. Next year, they could be in the playoffs if John Wall plays real well and they sign David Bertans. They could also be the 11th team in the East again, or right at the bottom. It all depends on one player. And that is how I recommend doing the John Wall. Thank you for tuning in to the Rebuildables podcast. My name is Gerald Hopkins. Next week will be the last team we cover in season 1. It'll be the New York Jets. Yeah, I'm bringing it back to football. And I'm going to do a season 1 finale special. I'm not going to disclose you what I'm thinking of yet. I don't want you to know everything I'm doing. That's not fair to you. But I think everyone will like it. Thank you again for tuning into the podcast. I'll talk to you next week, Thursday.